The two-mallet etude this year is a beautiful etude in my opinion, but it's also a very difficult one as well. As you start learning this, I suggest taking it pretty slow, way under the marked tempo, so that you can really learn the notes and you can start building some sort of kinesthetic memory as you're learning the pitches and you're ingraining it into your head and you're able to think about the notes and physically be able to play them. And as you learn to get around the marimba, there's some natural stickings that are suggested, and they definitely work. There are definitely some other moments that you might find that you need to alter because of that. But the most important thing is always aiming for that consistent sound and flow of the notes and make sure that your sticking doesn't get in the way of that. So slow tempo, appropriate sticking as you're going through this at the early stages. And then also the early stages, start thinking about the overall music and the phrasing that we have. There are only two dynamics written in this entire etude, and we start off forte and we go to mezzo forte pretty early on, and we stay mezzo forte the whole thing. And historically, that's not the interpretation that Bach wanted. It was understood that we would add our own interpretations if we knew the style and we were able to play. We'd be doing music like this on a regular basis, and so we can add our own and think about where we're headed and where we're coming from and start incorporating that from the very beginning. Some other things to think about with most of Bach's writing, it looks very linear. It just looks like a whole bunch of 16th notes going on, but actually not all of the notes are quite as important. They're not equal. Some notes he does a great job separating, where one will pop out of the texture and we have a little rumble at the bottom. And that can also be interpreted as the melody, the soaring melody on top that you need to be phrasing, while the other notes are just the accompaniment going on at the same time. So start thinking about all of that as you're learning this and you're going through in the early stages of preparing the two-mallet etude. Once you've started to make these musical decisions and the big picture shaping that you're doing for some of the phrases, it's important to go back to what we're talking about with those. Some notes are more important, and that's kind of the inflection and almost the nuance of the line. It's important to incorporate those from the very beginning of your practice. Don't wait till the end to do that. Because it is a part of the muscle memory and the whole process of while we're learning. Start from the beginning, get it from the beginning instead of waiting to the end to add it when you're used to playing it one specific way. So if we can incorporate that from the early stages, it'd be excellent. Another thing when we're thinking about those nuances, be very aware of your body and where it's positioned behind the keyboard, because we have lots of arpeggios and arpeggiated passages that are moving up and down. The tendency for us when we're playing it slower is to want to move side to side and go back and forth with those notes. But when we get faster, that's almost going to be impossible, although it might be possible. But your note accuracy has definitely become a big issue with that. So I would generally know the range that I'm going to be playing and what I can comfortably reach with each hand, plant my feet, and go ahead and start that at the slower tempo that when we first start learning it. And then we can build up, and you'll know your body will be fully aware where the mallets are supposed to be playing and where the bars are, and you'd be definitely more successful if you incorporate that into your practicing as well. Mallet selection for the two-mallet etude can be a tricky one. We have to think about the range of the instrument and where we're going, and also the separation of the lines, where some of the notes are higher and where we're suddenly jumping back down and there's a melodic line floating on top on the higher end. And when taking that into consideration, when choosing your mallets, I suggest something along the lines of a two-tone mallet, mainly because we have that nice soft wrap on the outside with the yarn that allows you to play softer with a relaxed and still controlled, but just a very relaxed stroke. And it sounds a little bit something like this. Then with just a little change in my stroke, a little more intensity from my grip and my stroke, I can cut through just a little bit more. It's still same height, same intensity, but it's just, it cuts through the bar. And that helps with some of the passages, like the very end of this etude, with that ascending line while we have all the notes at the bottom. So the lower notes on the bottom can still stay soft and appropriate for the register, but then I can have that ascending melodic line and that intensity growing and growing and cutting through. And that's why I like the two-tone mallets for this. Some other things to take into consideration when you're choosing your mallet is to have a mallet that is not too small. We want a mallet head and a cord that's going to be a little bit on the medium to larger size so that we can get the full bar resonating at all times and have the full sound no matter what room you go into. If we use some of the smaller mallets, the cord or vibraphone wrapped mallets, those might sound great in your band room, but as soon as we get into another room that isn't the same, it might actually lose the sound integrity that you had. So it's important to go with a mallet that's going to be consistent in almost all the performing spaces that you can end up in. And so rubber is another option that some people like to use as well, but take into consideration there's a lot of articulation, heavy articulation up front on that sound. And so depending on the space, you might hear nothing but that articulation slapping back against the walls, and it distracts from the tone of the marimba. So again, lots of options, but something more along the lines of a two-tone mallet would probably be really great for this etude. When it comes down to it, the two-mallet etude, one of the breaking points is going to be note accuracy. And so if you implement a lot of these well thought out practice habits from the beginning all the way through the end, you're going to be relatively successful. If you wait to the last minute to start learning this one, it might become an issue for you. Note accuracy, direction of the phrases, and careful attention to time and playing what's on the page is really what's going to help you stand out.